What if the man who was supposed to deliver justice was the very one who buried an innocent father alive for 25 years, while the real monster walked free, spending a dead woman's credit cards just days after crushing her skull? In the quiet suburbs of Austin, Texas, on an ordinary summer morning in 1986, a 3-year-old boy wandered alone in the street, calling for his mother. What began as a family birthday celebration ended in a nightmare that exposed the darkest corners of the justice system. This is the story of Michael Morton, Christine Morton, and a blue bandana that didn't just free one innocent man. It changed Texas law forever, sent a prosecutor to jail for the first time in American history, and proved that truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds its way into the light. If stories of unbreakable love, devastating betrayal, and redemption after decades of darkness keep you glued to the screen, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. These are the cases that remind us innocence can survive even the heaviest chains. August 13th, 1986, began like so many others in the Morton home on Hazelhurst Drive in Austin, Texas. Michael Morton, turning 32 the day before, had taken his wife Christine and their 3-year-old son Eric to the city grill for a simple birthday dinner. The 3 years prior had been tough, medical bills for a sick child, money tight, but that evening, as they walked to the car, little Eric held both parents' hands, swinging between them. Michael scooped his son up. Christine threw her head back in genuine laughter, the kind that made everyone around them smile too. In that parking lot moment, Michael felt it deeply. This was what life was all about. The next morning, he rose at 5 a.m., showered, dressed quietly in the dark, while Christine remained asleep. He left a small, affectionate handwritten note on the bathroom vanity, a gentle tease that she had fallen asleep on his birthday, ending with the tender words, "I love you." He kissed her goodbye in his heart and clocked in at work just after 5:30 a.m. But across town, something was terribly wrong. A concerned neighbor spotted 3-year-old Eric wandering outside alone, diaper soiled, shoes dusty, crying for his mother. The neighbor brought the boy inside the Morton home on Hazelhurst Drive and called out, "Silence." Moving room by room, they reached the master bedroom. There, beneath a blanket weighted down by a blue suitcase and a wicker basket, lay Christine Morton, 31 years old, brutally beaten to death by blunt force trauma. No forced entry, nothing stolen, no immediate signs of sexual assault. Sheriff Jim Boutwell of Williamson County arrived, and, within the first hour, fixed his conclusion: the husband did it. When Michael called home from work, worried because Eric never made it to daycare, Boutwell answered he gave no details about Christine, just one cold command: come home now. The questions that followed were accusatory from the start. Michael begged to see his wife. He was refused. 6 weeks later, after the funeral, Michael was home with Eric when the doorbell rang. He picked up his little boy and opened the door. Deputies were there. Without warning, one reached into Michael's arms, taking Eric as Sheriff Boutwell cuffed Michael's hands behind his back. Eric screamed, stretching his small arms toward his father, crying, "Daddy!" That image, the boy's desperate reach, would haunt Michael for the next 25 years. A child who had just lost his mother, lost his father in the same doorway, in the same terrible month. The trial that followed in February 1987 was a masterclass in narrative over evidence. District Attorney Ken Anderson, 33, aggressive and charismatic, had no murder weapon, no eyewitnesses to violence, and not a single trace of physical evidence linking Michael to the crime. So he built a story instead. He painted Michael as a man consumed by rage because Christine had refused intimacy on his birthday. Anderson read the private, loving note aloud in court, twisting its affectionate words and "I love you" closing into proof of humiliation and fury. Michael took the stand, calm and truthful, explaining the note and swearing Christine was alive when he left for work. Then Anderson's star witness, Dr. Roberto Bayardo, the medical examiner, testified that based on stomach contents, Christine died around 1 a.m., hours before Michael's alibi. It was devastating. What the jury never heard was that this method was unreliable, that Bayardo had limited access to the body, and that he later admitted uncertainty. Anderson knew the weaknesses, but presented it as unshakable science in closing. With tears in his eyes, he painted inflammatory pictures without medical support. The jury convicted quickly. Life in prison. Anderson told reporters afterward that life wasn't enough. Michael deserved death. Soon after, Anderson was named Prosecutor of the Year. Michael was locked away. But hidden in the prosecutor's files was a secret that would take 25 years to surface. Michael's first prison cell was tiny. Arms outstretched could touch both walls. 2 men shared the space. The system dictated every minute when to wake, eat, shower, sleep. He described the erosion not as sudden collapse, but as slow rust. Quiet, invisible, eating away pieces of himself. He wrote over 1,000 pages in journals, pouring out memories of Christine's genuine laugh, Eric swinging between them, the ordinary joys now gone. Appeals failed repeatedly. Visitation with Eric twice a year for 2 hours became his oxygen. He memorized every detail of his growing son. But as Eric became a teenager, the silences grew. Eventually a letter came. Eric wanted to stop visits. Michael asked for one final meeting. "Look me in the eye and tell me." Eric did. Michael turned to Christine's sister, "Take care of him," then walked away, heart-breaking, to spare his son more pain. Later, when Eric was adopted and changed his name, erasing Michael as father on paper, that was the blow that nearly ended him. When I lost him, that was the end of it. 19 years in, parole was offered, if he confessed. Michael refused. "All I have left is my actual innocence." He would not trade truth for freedom. Then came the call that cracked the door open. The Innocence Project reached out. Civil attorney Barry Scheck, a medical malpractice specialist with no prior criminal experience, took the case after reading the file. The loving birthday note left the morning of the murder made no sense for a guilty man. No weapon, no physical evidence. Polygraphs passed, flawed medical testimony. Scheck met Michael, heard the story firsthand. The birthday dinner, Christine's head thrown back laugh, the rapid shift from grief to accusation. "My God," he told his wife upon returning home, "he's innocent. We have to get him out." She replied simply, "Then do it." They discovered a blood-stained blue bandana found by Christine's brother John Kirkpatrick near a construction site about 100 yards behind the home. Handed to police in 1986, it was never tested. DNA technology didn't exist then. Scheck fought for access. The new DA, John Bradley, mentored by Ken Anderson, now a judge, resisted. It would muddy the waters. Motions were denied. Scheck confronted him directly. "What are you afraid of?" In 2010, the Texas Court of Appeals ordered testing. The bandana revealed Christine's blood and DNA from an unknown male. CODIS hit Mark Allen Norwood, a career criminal with a history of violence, living nearby in 1986. His DNA also linked him to another unsolved murder, that of Deborah Baker in 1988, just 16 months later, with eerily similar details. Brunette mother in her 30s, toddler at home, attacked on the 13th. Norwood had even sold Michael's stolen Colt Commander gun shortly after Christine's death. Hidden files revealed even worse, exculpatory evidence buried by Anderson. A green van seen behind the home. Footprints, fingerprints on the sliding door. Christine's credit card used in San Antonio days later. A forged check, and most devastating, a transcript of 3-year-old Eric on the day of the funeral, telling his grandmother, "Mommy's crying. The monster's here. He hit Mommy, the big monster with the big mustache." Eric said Daddy wasn't there. Anderson had it all and hid it. Eric had described Norwood's prominent mustache. The boy's words were dismissed. Michael walked free on October 4, 2011, after 24 years and 7 months. He tilted his head to the free sun. Norwood was arrested, convicted of both murders, and sentenced to life. Ken Anderson faced unprecedented accountability. A special inquiry found he withheld evidence. He pled to criminal contempt, served 9 days in jail, was disbarred, and resigned from the bench. The first, and still only, prosecutor in U.S. history jailed for such misconduct. Michael helped pass the Morton Act, requiring open file discovery in Texas. He received compensation and wrote the memoir, Getting Life. Father and son eventually reunited at a quiet dinner, shoes matching, mannerisms echoing. A handshake became a long hug. "Son, Dad," Michael found peace, dropping the weight of anger for accountability. Revenge doesn't work, but accountability works. Christine was 31, vibrant, loving, laughing with her head thrown back. Eric was 3, walking between parents, later screaming for daddy. Michael lost 25 years, but never his innocence. The blue bandana, a forgotten clue, exposed the lies and changed justice forever. A family destroyed, a system humbled, a truth that refused to stay buried. What hidden files still wait in other cases? How many monsters roam because someone chose a story over evidence? If this story of love, loss, and hard-won redemption touches you, share below. Subscribe for more tales where DNA rewrites history. Christine, Michael, and Eric remind us, truth endures, families can heal, and no lie survives forever. Michael Morton stepped into that prison cell in 1987 carrying more than his innocence. He carried the memory of Christine's genuine laugh, the kind that threw her head back and lit up a room, and the image of 3-year-old Eric swinging happily between his parents in the City Grill parking lot on the night of August 12, 1986. Those memories became both lifeline and torment inside the tiny cell where stretching both arms could touch opposite walls. 2 grown men shared that suffocating space. The system dictated every breath, lights on, lights off, meals, showers, the rare sliver of sky during yard time. Michael later described the slow erosion of self not as a dramatic break, but as rust, quiet, invisible, relentless, eating away pieces of the man he once was, until one day he looked down and realized parts of him were simply gone. Yet he wrote, over 1,000 pages of journals in cramped handwriting, pouring out love for Christine and the ordinary wonders stolen from him. He recalled the birthday dinner in vivid detail, the way Eric's small hands gripped both parents, the laughter that spilled naturally when Christine tossed her head back at something real and joyful. He wrote about missing first steps that became first words, a boy's voice changing, milestones passing behind concrete walls. Appeals were filed and denied, each rejection hammering home the same cruel message. No one is coming. The world outside had moved on. The file was locked. Ken Anderson's career soared. He was named Prosecutor of the Year and later appointed a state district judge in the very courthouse where he had secured the conviction. Michael remained exactly where Anderson wanted him. Visitation with Eric became sacred oxygen. Twice a year, 2 precious hours. Michael memorized every new freckle, every shift in his son's posture, storing details like treasures to carry through the next 6 months of isolation. But children grow, and prison glass turns tender moments cold. As Eric entered his teens, the easy silences of childhood stretched into awkward gaps. Then came the letter. Eric wanted to stop the visits. Michael asked for one final meeting. "Look me in the eye and tell me yourself." Eric did. Michael turned to Christine's sister with 3 quiet words. "Take care of him." Then he stood and walked away, not because he had run out of love, but because he loved his son too much to make the goodbye any harder than it already was. Years later, when legal papers arrived announcing Eric's adoption and name change, erasing Michael as father on paper, that was the blow that nearly shattered what remained. When I lost him, that was the end of it. That's when I had nothing left. Years into his sentence, parole was offered with one devastating condition: to confess. Stand up and say on record that he had murdered Christine. Michael refused without hesitation. "All I have left is my actual innocence, and if I have to be in prison the rest of my life, I'm not giving that up." The board moved on. He returned to his cell, clinging to the only thing the system could not take. Then, in the depths of that long night, the phone call came. The Innocence Project wanted his case. Barry Scheck, a Houston civil attorney specializing in medical malpractice who had never handled a criminal matter, opened the file and saw what others had missed. A guilty man planning murder does not leave a loving handwritten note on the bathroom vanity the morning of the crime, openly referencing a private disagreement and ending with "I love you," No murder weapon, no physical evidence. Polygraphs passed. Flawed stomach content timing testimony that forensic science itself rejected. Sheck drove to East Texas, sat across from Michael in the visitation room, and listened as the man walked through every detail of August 12th and 13th. The city grill dinner, Christine's real laughter, the quiet 5 a.m. departure. "I didn't really have the opportunity to grieve for her," Michael said. "Everything changed so rapidly, from her to me." Sheck went home and told his wife, "My God, he's innocent. We have to get him out." Her reply was simple and fierce. "Then do it." That decision led them to a blood-stained blue bandana found by Christine's own brother, John Kirkpatrick, roughly 100 yards behind the Hazelhurst Drive home near a construction site. It had been handed to police in 1986 and forgotten. In the era before DNA testing was common, it sat bagged and ignored. Sheck fought for testing. The new district attorney, John Bradley, mentored by now Judge Ken Anderson, resisted. It would muddy the waters. Motions were denied. Sheck confronted him in his office. "What are you afraid of? I can handle the truth. Can you?" The Texas Court of Appeals eventually ordered the testing. The bandana carried Christine's blood and the DNA of an unknown male. CODIS returned a hit. Mark Allen Norwood, a career criminal with a violent history who had lived nearby in 1986. Further digging revealed Norwood had sold Michael's stolen .45 Colt Commander gun to a co-worker shortly after the murder. His DNA also matched evidence from the 1988 murder of Deborah Baker, another brunette mother in her 30s with a toddler, killed in an identical manner on the 13th of the month. 2 mothers, 2 toddlers, the same signature, the same killer, free because the wrong man sat behind bars. But the deepest betrayal lay in Anderson's own hidden files. A green van seen repeatedly behind the Morton home in the days before the murder. Unpreserved footprints in the mud. Unknown fingerprints on the sliding glass door. Christine's Visa card used in San Antonio days later. A forged check cashed with her name. And most heartbreaking, a verbatim transcript of 3-year-old Eric speaking to his grandmother on the day of the funeral. "Mommy's crying. Stop it. Go away, 'cause the monster's here. He hit Mommy." The monster threw the blue suitcase on the bed. Mommy went to the hospital. When asked if Daddy was there, Eric said no. The boy even described the big monster with the big mustache, a detail that matched Norwood. Anderson had buried it all. He knew. He proceeded anyway. He built a career on the lie. On October 4th, 2011, after 24 years and 7 months, Michael Morton walked free into a Texas autumn afternoon. He tilted his head back toward the sun and later said the free sun felt different, warmer, lighter, alive in a way prison yard light never could. Mark Allen Norwood was arrested at his mother's home in Bastrop, Texas. He was convicted of both murders and sentenced to life. Ken Anderson finally faced a reckoning unprecedented in American legal history. A special inquiry found probable cause for withholding evidence. He pled to criminal contempt, served 9 days in jail, was disbarred and resigned from the bench, the first prosecutor in U.S. history imprisoned for misconduct in a wrongful conviction case. Michael channeled his pain into purpose, helping pass the Michael Morton Act, requiring open-file discovery in Texas, so no other family would suffer the same hidden truths. He received compensation and wrote the powerful memoir Getting Life. Years later, at a quiet dinner arranged by Sheck, father and son sat together without glass or guards. Same shoes, same mannerisms, a handshake melted into a long, healing hug. "Son. Dad." In that moment, Michael glimpsed something like heaven. The anger he carried for so long, the desire for revenge against those who knew better, he eventually set down. Revenge doesn't work, but accountability works. It's the equilibrium. It's the social glue. Christine was 31, vibrant, loving, her laughter a gift that made others join in. Eric was 3, innocent, reaching desperately for Daddy in that doorway. Michael lost a quarter century, but never his truth. The blue bandana, once forgotten in storage, became the thread that unraveled decades of lies and mended what could be mended. A family torn apart by violence and betrayal found fragments of healing. A system was forced to look in the mirror. A monster with a big mustache was finally caged. And a father walked back into the light, carrying journals full of love that refused to die. What hidden truths still wait in prosecutor files across the country? How many children still reach for parents who were taken not just by killers, but by a system that chose victory over justice? If this story of a father's unbreakable innocence, a child's buried words, and a bandana that rewrote history moves you, share your thoughts below. Subscribe. We're diving deeper into more cases where truth fights its way home. Christine's laugh, Eric's small hands, Michael's quiet strength, they echo on. Justice, though delayed, can still arrive. And no lie survives the light forever. By the time the blue bandana finally reached a modern laboratory years after Christine Morton's murder on August 13, 1986, Michael Morton had already spent more than 2 decades inside Texas prisons. His once 32-year-old frame now carrying the quiet weight of a man approaching his late 50s. The bandana, discovered by Christine's own brother, John Kirkpatrick, roughly 100 yards behind the Hazelhurst Drive home near a construction site stained with blood and handed directly to Williamson County detectives in 1986, had sat forgotten in storage through countless appeals and denials. When testing finally came, it revealed not only Christine's blood, but a clear DNA profile from an unknown male. That single piece of cloth, overlooked for a quarter century, became the key that unlocked everything. CODIS, the national DNA database, returned a match almost immediately. Mark Allen Norwood, born in 1954, a man with a lengthy criminal history spanning receiving stolen property, aggravated assault, arson, and burglary. In 1986, at age 32, Norwood had been living startlingly close to the Morton family on Hazelhurst Drive. The connections grew even more chilling when investigators dug deeper into Norwood's life. He had sold Michael Morton's stolen .45 Colt Commander handgun to a former co-worker named Lewis Wan shortly after Christine's death, a weapon taken from the Morton home the morning of the murder. Even more devastating, Norwood's DNA matched evidence from the January 13, 1988, murder of 34-year-old Deborah Baker, another brunette mother with a 3-year-old child living in Austin. The similarities were haunting. Both women attacked in their homes on the 13th of the month, both left in similar conditions, both cases involving toddlers nearby. Norwood had lived just one street corner away from the Baker home. For 25 years, while Michael sat in a cell, the real predator had remained free, unhindered because the system had proudly closed the book on the wrong man. But the deepest wounds came from what Ken Anderson had hidden all along in his prosecution files. Neighbor reports of a green van repeatedly parked behind the Morton home in the days before August 13, 1986, with a man disappearing into the wooded area exactly where the bandana was later found. Unpreserved footprints in the mud near the sliding glass door. Unknown fingerprints on that same door that were never run through any database. Christine's missing Visa card used at a San Antonio jewelry store just days after her death, with a local officer claiming he could identify the woman who tried to use it. No follow-up call was ever made. A forged check made out to Christine and cashed with her signature. Anderson had every report. He disclosed none of it to the defense. And then there was the transcript that shattered hearts. On the day of Christine's funeral, her mother, Rita Kirkpatrick, sat with 3-year-old Eric and carefully wrote down his words verbatim. "Mommy's crying." "She stop it. Go away, 'cause the monster's here. He hit Mommy. The monster threw the blue suitcase on the bed. He's mad." "No, Mommy, stop. Mommy went to the hospital." When Rita asked the most important question, "Was Daddy there, Eric?" the little boy answered clearly, "No, Mommy and Eric was there." Eric even described the big monster with the big mustache, a detail that precisely matched Mark Allen Norwood's prominent facial hair. Anderson had this eyewitness account from a traumatized 3-year-old. He buried it. He told the family the monster was probably just Michael, that the child was confused. Eric grew up believing his father was the killer. The memory of the real monster faded into the shadows of a child's trauma. On October 4, 2011, after 24 years and 7 months behind bars, Michael Morton walked out of prison a free man at age 57. He stepped into the Texas autumn light and tilted his head back, feeling what he later called the free sun, different, warmer, alive in a way the prison yard light had never been. Mark Allen Norwood was arrested at his mother's home in Bastrop, Texas, on November 9, 2011. He was 57 years old. His trial for Christine's murder was moved to San Angelo in Tom Green County to ensure an impartial jury. Convicted of capital murder, he received life in prison under 1986 laws, making him eligible for parole in 15 years. Christine's family asked prosecutors not to seek the death penalty. They had suffered enough. Norwood was later convicted in Deborah Baker's case as well, receiving consecutive life sentences. The monster with the big mustache was finally caged. Ken Anderson's reckoning came in a way no American prosecutor had ever faced before. A special criminal inquiry, convened by the Texas Supreme Court, found probable cause that he had withheld exculpatory evidence, tampered with records, and ignored judicial orders. Anderson took the stand, voice cracking, calling the case his worst nightmare and claiming his office had done everything possible. His lawyer suggested key details were lost to the sands of time. The court disagreed. Charged with criminal contempt, Anderson entered a plea deal in November 2013. He surrendered his law license permanently, resigned from the bench, served 9 days in the Williamson County Jail with 1 day credit, and paid a $500 fine. 9 days for 25 years of stolen life. For a little boy who grew up without his father. For Deborah Baker, killed because the real predator was never pursued. It was historic. The first time a prosecutor in the United States had ever served jail time for misconduct in a wrongful conviction. To this day, he remains the only one. Michael turned his pain into purpose. He worked with lawmakers to pass Senate Bill 1611, signed by Governor Rick Perry in 2013 and known as the Michael Morton Act. It mandates open file discovery. Prosecutors must share all evidence with the defense before trial, the very reform Anderson had refused. Michael received nearly $2 million in compensation, roughly $80,000 for each year stolen, under one of the more generous Texas statutes. He transformed over 1,000 pages of prison journals into the memoir Getting Life, a New York Times bestseller that read like the most astonishing legal thriller, except every word was painfully true. The most tender reunion came quietly, away from cameras. Barry Scheck arranged a private dinner at his home. No glass, no guards, no time limits. Michael and Eric, now a grown man, sat together as father and son for the first time in decades. They noticed their shoes were nearly identical, their blue jeans the same shade, their posture and gait echoing across the room. A handshake became a long, wordless hug that Scheck later described as a melding, like two halves finally returning to wholeness. Michael said softly, "Son." Eric replied, "Dad." In that single exchange, Michael caught a glimpse of what heaven must feel like. Eric had spent most of his life believing his father killed his mother. Rebuilding trust took time, but Michael marveled at the speed with which his son opened his heart again. Michael spoke openly about the anger he carried for years, the rage toward Anderson and the system that knowingly buried the truth. He wanted revenge at times. The feeling was raw and real. Then one day he set it down. "It's like I dropped 25 pounds, he said. "Revenge doesn't work. But accountability works. It's the equilibrium. It's the social glue. Because if you're not accountable, you can do anything." Christine Morton was 31 years old when she was taken. Vibrant, quick to laugh with her head thrown back, a loving mother who walked hand in hand with her little boy. Eric was 3, innocent, reaching desperately for Daddy in that Hazelhurst Drive doorway. Michael was 32 when handcuffs clicked behind his back. He emerged at 57, carrying journals full of love that refused to die. The blue bandana, a forgotten clue stained with truth, exposed the lies and helped stitch a broken family back together. A wife murdered, a child orphaned twice, a father robbed of a quarter century, a prosecutor humbled, a law changed, and a son who could finally say Dad and mean it with his whole heart. What other bandanas, what other children's words, what other hidden files still wait in evidence rooms and prosecutor offices across America? How many families are still living inside the rust because someone chose victory over truth? If this story of a father's quiet strength, a little boy's buried testimony and justice that arrived late but fiercely touches your heart, share your thoughts below. We read every one. Subscribe for more true stories where DNA and determination rewrite endings. Christine's laughter, Eric's small hands, Michael's journals. They all remind us that love and truth can survive even the longest night. The road back to Dad is never easy, but it is always worth walking. The Morton family's journey continues to echo. May it inspire every cold case, every wrongfully convicted soul, and every family still waiting for the light.